Okay, so it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. The board has already met in executive session, and we saluted the flag in there. So at this point, we're up to the roll call. Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Ms. Schaefer?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Ms. Singh?
Here.
Mrs. White?
Here.
Ms. Light?
Here.
Mr. Khanna?
Here.
Ms. Hira?
Here.
Mr. Markarian? Here. Mr. Syatt?
Here.
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Madam President?
Thank you. I'm just going to read the statement of public notice. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of Bernards Township. Notice of the time and place of this meeting was provided, and copies of that resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and to the Township Clerk, and a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board in the Board of Education offices. For those members of the public who are unable to attend our meeting in person, there are two live stream links for the meeting. One is just a backup of the other, and the links are on our district website, www.bernardsboe.com. We very much welcome input from the public. There are two times during the regular meetings that the public is invited to speak. One time is earlier in the meeting before the board votes, when you may speak about any item that is listed on tonight's agenda. Towards the end of the meeting, there is another public forum to address any matter of public concern related to the schools. When you approach the microphone, please state your name and address. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes duration. No participant may speak more than once during a given public comment session. In order to run efficient meetings and to allow maximum opportunity for members of the public, the board reserves the right to set a different time limit for individual comments or set an overall time limit, which I don't think will be an issue tonight since we don't have very many people here. As a courtesy of those individuals unable to attend our meetings in person, public comment may be made remotely through Zoom. You can get the link on the district website and select Board of Education, followed by public comment to get the specific instructions, or you can click the link in the agenda. Public comments made in person will be processed first, then comments via Zoom. No public comments will be accepted before 7 p.m. or after the last item board forum of the agenda. Please understand that public comment portions of our agendas are not structured as question and answer sessions, but they are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. The board and administration will respond to public comments to the extent possible. Any board responses to public comments will generally be addressed during board forum or during committee reports. However, all comments are considered and will be investigated and addressed as appropriate. Please be courteous and mindful of the rights of others when speaking. Comments may not be abusive, obscene, threatening, or irrelevant. Please understand that students and employees have specific legal and privacy protections. The board is not permitted to respond in public to comments about students and employees. Please also understand that the board will not be responsible for the content of comments made by members of the public. Members of the public are cautioned that they are speaking at their own risk, and any personally directed statements they make may subject them to legal liability to the affected individual. If it is necessary for the board to go into executive session at the end of the meeting, we will provide an estimated length of time for the session and whether any action is anticipated to be taken after returning to public session. Okay, we're up to our student representative, Gordon Lee.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. First of all, allow me to wish all of you a happy Pi Day, as today is March 14th, or 3.14. Speaking of celebration, Ridge has much to celebrate thanks to the outstanding successes of our teams and clubs, and indeed, there are quite a few accolades here that I would like to share with all of you. The Ridge dance team put on a phenomenal performance at the Starbound National Talent Competition, winning high gold for all of their dances. Large Group Jazz won first overall in their category. The team also competed in the Beyond the Stars competition, all their dances receiving a platinum award and placing first in all of their categories. Large Group Hip Hop placed 6th in the overall top 10 of their division. Ridge congratulates the team and everyone involved on their hard work, teamwork, and ultimate success. In sports, the Ridge swim team finished one of their best seasons in history, sweeping the board at the New Jersey Meet of Champions. Swimmers set new team records in the 200 medley and 400 free relays. Additionally, Ridge swimmers placed very high in various individual and team events, many setting new team and personal bests. Following their victory at the national level, the Ridge Black and Ridge Green competition cheerleading teams are officially ranked first and second in the state of New Jersey, with Ridge Black holding onto their first place title for the 4th year in a row. Finally, Ridge Ice Hockey beat Livingston 6-1 in a very exciting state championship game, concluding their extremely successful season. Ridge applauds all of our sports teams, the coaches, parents, and the support staff for their accomplishments and, of course, the effort that went into them. Forensics had another strong showing these past few weekends, competing in 3 tournaments: the Montville Invitational, District Congress, and the 6th Catholic Forensics League tournament of the year. Ridge students placed first in many events at every one of these tournaments, qualifying for the National Catholic Forensics League tournament and the National Speech and Debate tournament. Ridge congratulates these students, their coaches, and their families, and wishes them well as they prepare for these large, highly competitive, and extremely selective events. Through all of this, the student body has not been idle either. The prom committee has already been formed and has begun the process of working with the PTO and other groups to organize senior prom. And of course, keeping with the tradition of Pi Day, Amnesty International Club successfully hosted a Pi Your Teacher event today to raise money for various causes around the world. These past few weeks have shown Ridge's ability to work hard and to give back to our communities. As the year progresses, we hope to continue to uphold this legacy of citizenship and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Does anyone have any questions? Just so you guys know, I had emailed Gordon the other day and copied Dr. Lazovic on the email about trying to coordinate something with the younger schools, student governments like we talked about at the last meeting. So he's working on that, right?
That is correct. I actually met with Dr. Lazovic on Thursday, and I met with our student government advisors and certain senior members of the student government today, and we are in the process of formulating a plan. We have a very rough one written up. We are in the process of refining it, and within the next few days, we hope that it will be sent to Dr. Lazovic for approval, and we can begin to kickstart that whole process.
You're very efficient. A lot of work since, a couple of days ago. That's great. We look forward to hearing about that. Okay, as usual, you're welcome to go to where do you go after this, Gordon?
Yeah, so I actually have like a piano lesson after this. So
I thought you had something in the building, don't you?
I do actually
Yeah.
normally. I am normally a peer leader, and
That's what I thought.
Usually I miss the first 10 or so minutes. About 10 or so minutes of the meeting of their meeting for this. But peer leaders actually we end regular meetings after the first marking period.
Okay.
So
I wasn't confused. Great.
no,
Okay.
yeah, you're correct. You're correct.
Okay. Bye-bye. Okay, so I just have 2 quick comments before we move on to the presentation. So we are working on a date for the town hall meeting for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Project, and Mr. Syatt's been working on that. So that's going to be announced shortly, and that is an opportunity for the entire community to participate. I think it's going to be on Zoom, but I'm not sure how it works because they're going to collect feedback from everybody on what topics people think are important and what focus areas we want to look at. So that's the beginning of that process, and we're looking forward to getting more information on that soon. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we're working on setting up Bernard's Connect meetings again. We had to stop that during COVID because we couldn't have in-person meetings. So if those of you who have been around for a while remember, during the strategic planning process we met, and students, faculty, staff members, and board members and community members were all invited to come and talk about different areas that they were concerned about, interested in, and we came up with different strands of the strategic plan for the district. So a couple of those strands we had Berners Connect meetings about before COVID, and then we kind of had to shut that down for a while. So we're going to try to start that up. We're thinking of Thursday evenings, but we don't have the exact dates. We'll put them out shortly. The first one's going to be about collaboration and communication, which is one of the strands that came out of the meeting of the strategic plan. So that'll be an opportunity for all of us to talk to each other face-to-face after COVID about how we think we could collaborate with everybody in the district. And then the second one is going to be about technology and instruction, which I know is also a hot topic. So we are going to get those dates out shortly, and we hope that a lot of people can participate. And at this point, the board is going to go down below for the presentation. We're going to move down there.
We're all set. Everybody hear me? All right, good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight with Sean Syatt, Assistant Superintendent, to present to you the post-secondary report for the class of 2021. Mr. Syatt and I are the acting directors of school counseling this year, while Ms. Smith is on maternity leave. So we will be co-presenting her piece of this presentation. For an historical reference, Mr. Syatt has served in both the Director of Guidance position and the Director of Curriculum position in the past. So he's given this report many times. Tonight we're going to cover SAT and ACT results for the class of 2021 and AP results for the school year 2020-21. We'll also share information with you about the post-secondary process, trends, and decisions for the class of 2021. Mr. Syatt.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see everyone. So we'll start tonight talking about standardized testing, as Ms. Fox said. And of course, it's been quite a while. We've been talking about SATs and ACTs, although perspective on these two tests has changed a lot over the years. And of course, you are going to hear a common theme tonight. You will hear the theme of the impact of the pandemic on this class of 2021. And hopefully that won't be the theme when we talk to you again next year, but there was definitely an impact on our class of 2021, as there was across the nation, when you look at both the number of students who were taking these tests and access to the tests. So access to tests last year was a particular issue, as many centers closed, and the SAT actually stopped testing during periods of the spring when students would normally be signing up for these tests. So there was a definite impact, and you can see that in the numbers nationally. So you can see about 1.5 million took the SAT, which is down about 700,000 from the previous year. And you can see only about half of the students took the test, the PSAT test, from the previous year. So certainly, again, the impact of COVID. This is because centers were closed, students were deferring, students were deciding not to take tests. And again, you'll also hear the common theme, and there's another impact on why students aren't taking these tests as much, and that is something that I know Ms. Smith has been talking about the last couple of years, and that is the idea of test optional and blind test. And that's a trend that we've been seeing more and more over the last several years. I remember that, 10 plus years ago when I was talking about this, this was a small blip on the radar, and there were only a handful of schools that were looking at test optional. Now we're talking about schools in the thousands who are accepting test optional. So it's become much more the norm, and many colleges were making the shift and pivoting and changing and allowing students test optional or blind test when the pandemic hit, to make it a little bit easier, because they knew it was very difficult to access these tests. So last time Ms. Smith talked to this group, she talked a little bit about fair tests. The idea of fair tests is that, of course, students should have the option as to whether or not they want to send their test scores. Some of this should be dependent upon their academic performance. So the idea of a blind test is that many schools will state that if a student meets a certain criteria based on their GPA, they don't have to take the test at all. And test optional is that many students are allowed to make the decision about whether or not they're able to send their test or not. And so what it resulted in, that combined with the pandemic, was far fewer students taking the assessments. And so just a quick comparison, we do talk about this every year, but there are some changes since we talked to you last about these two tests. So quick comparison, SAT to ACT, roughly the same length of time to take these tests, but of course the difference is ACT has that science component, and the SAT phasing out the essay component. And you note that on the slide, June 2021. As I said, length of time about the same. And of course, the way they're scored looks very different, right? Many of us are used to this 200 to 800 range on a particular section of the SAT, and then the idea of a 1 to 36 range on the ACT. And you'll see that more when we actually look at some of the data. And then big change for folks that have younger students here who may be planning to take the SAT in a few years, the SAT will be going all digital. That's significant for a couple of reasons. The first reason is, in our society of instant gratification, it will no longer take weeks to get scores, it will take days. So students will be able to get their scores in a matter of days, at least this is what the College Board claims. And so that is a game changer. The other thing too is they're gonna shorten the length of the test. So right now the length of the test is about 3 hours, it will go down to about 2 hours. So those are two significant changes as far as the SAT is concerned. And again, you'll certainly hear more about that as you hopefully get to see this year after year. Okay, so just the big picture, and we want to give you some comparisons to national trends, and of course you can see the Ridge trend. So pretty static in terms of the number of Ridge students that took the SAT last year compared to 2020. Not much of a drop off at all, but notice the drop off in New Jersey. All right, it's a huge drop off. Right, you had almost 83,000 test takers in 2020. It drops off to 54,000. And then note the New Jersey drop off for ACT as well, right? Almost half the number of test takers. And then at the bottom of the slide, note this other piece, which I think is pretty significant. 48% of graduates 48% of the class of 2021 took the SAT in New Jersey. And that's way down, right, from that 82% just a few years ago in 2018 who were taking the SAT. So again, a lot of that has to do with the pandemic and access to the tests. And remember, that of course is a New Jersey number. This is something else we talk a little bit about, and this frames the conversation around the SAT scores, and that is what the SAT benchmark score is. This is what we refer to as a predictive score. So it's what the College Board says is most likely to happen, and that is that a student earning these scores has a 75% chance of earning a C in a first semester credit-bearing college level class in certain courses. And you'll notice that they're noted here. I believe there's a clicker, but where's the laser, Kristen? The red, okay, yes, the red. Right, so you'll notice algebra, stats, pre-calc, or calculus. And then the same holds true for more of the humanities, history, lit, social science, or writing. These are the benchmark scores in both of those areas. And again, predictive. So these are the SAT mean scores over the last 4 years. And you can see again, we include New Jersey, we also have Ridge. You'll see that our Ridge score in both math and English writing is 649 in the writing, 663 in math. Math is up a hair from 2020, and it's about running what it's been running over the last 4 years. Our math number is up. It's the highest it's been in 4 years. Again, though, hard to draw a whole heck of a lot from that because there was this impact of not only the pandemic, but remember, virtual learning that was happening for students in that class. And in New Jersey, the mean score also ticked up a little bit. And so we are following that trend, and nationally as well. Not quite as much, though. And we usually show you this, and those of you that have been with us for many, many years, I'm dating myself, we used to refer to this list as the Mag 7, right? The Magnificent Seven. Some board members will remember that group. It has changed. These are similar school districts in terms of performance. And so you'll look at this list, 2020 to 2021. Our numbers, of course, as I said, are up in both math and the ERW section, 649, 663. Our math score puts us third, and our ERW score puts us second, I believe. Yes. Third? I thought it was second. Kristen and I were talking about it this morning. Yeah. All right, so ACT mean. These numbers have been trending upward almost since the day our students started taking this test. So we've noticed an upward trend in ACTs, and you'll see that over the last 5 years. Every score last year was up. It's the highest it's been, except in math. You'll notice math is just down a hair from the highest it was in 2018. But every other composite score is up. The average composite score is up, the English score is up, the reading score is up, and the science score is up as well. And then these are also those benchmark scores, although they're calculated a little bit differently. Again, predictive, but here's what they're saying. ACT subject area tests indicate a 50% chance of obtaining a B or a 75% chance of obtaining a C in a credit-bearing similar course. And then those are those benchmark scores. Bless. And this is the percent of students meeting those college readiness benchmarks. All 4 testing areas, 73%, which is up. Again, that's our highest we've had. Our English score is the highest we've had. Math is down. It's back to what it was pre-COVID, 2019. Reading is the highest score we've had in the last 6 years. And science is also up, and it is the highest we've had in the last 6 years. Our comparison districts, this one puts us third. You can see Ridge at 28.3. Only West Windsor, Plainsboro, Montgomery are higher. And by the way, where you see the asterisks, that means there's something interesting. These scores are not public yet. So in order for us to obtain these scores, I know that Ms. Tulin, who's the secretary for Ms. Fox, she actually has to call the schools to try to obtain the scores. So we did make efforts to obtain those 2 schools, and we weren't successful. So I want you to know we did try. All right, so the last thing to mention is method test prep. We started using method a number of years ago. This is an online adaptive test that students are able to use to prepare for the ACT and SATs. We've seen a drop-off actually in participation in this program. However, they are rebranding. They are no longer going to be called method test prep. They are now going to be called Methodize. And what it will be doing is that supposedly it's more tailored to the needs of the student, and the teachers will actually be able to have specific information generated out of Methodize to help students prepare for tests. But you can see last year we only had about 58 students use it. That's about half the number from the previous year. But what's interesting is those 58 students were really dedicated because they actually used it more than double the amount had used it the year before. So those students hopefully were very prepared because they certainly used it as much as double the number. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Fox for the AP scores.
I guess I'll try using this. Thank you, Mr. Syed. All right, I'm going to shift to AP exams. And so where Mr. Syed was talking about the SAT scores specific to the graduating class of 2021, even though students in younger grades take those scores, we're really reporting out on the class of 2021 for those 2 assessments. But for the AP exams, we're talking about students across grades 10, 11, and 12 and their performance and participation on all of the AP exams. So for those of you who are maybe unfamiliar with advanced placement exams, to just give you a little bit of background, advanced placement courses are the equivalent of an introductory college level course. At Ridge, we offer 30 of the 38 available advanced placement courses to students across grades 10 through 12. We do also allow students who might be proficient or taking a language in another school, such as Chinese and Japanese, to come take the exam at Ridge High School. But those are the only courses we allow students to take when we don't offer the course at Ridge High School. So the scores on the AP exam range from 1 to 5, with a 3 being considered the passing score. But it's important to note that whether or not a student earns credit in college for that passing score depends a lot and varies a lot by institution and by major. So it's important to check those out when you're looking at colleges. The large majority of our students who take the course traditionally also take the exam at Ridge, even though we don't require it, as some districts and some schools do require students to take the exam. Not surprising, we traditionally have outstanding achievement as well on all of our AP exams. So again, we'll talk a little bit about the impact of COVID on AP testing. For the last 2 years, as you know, testing has been modified significantly to adjust to the pandemic. In 2020, all of the exams were shortened significantly, and students took them from home digitally. In 2021, the College Board made an effort to return to normal, but again, took significant steps to accommodate the situation as it continued to unfold. All of the exams last year were full length again, but they were offered in both paper and pencil, as well as digital. They were also offered, you could provide the test digitally at home or in school, and there were 3 test windows when schools could schedule the AP exams, and really a 4th if you consider a makeup window that was scheduled kind of late into the summer. So typically there's 1 test window of 2 weeks. We had really 4 test windows last summer. So the College Board also implemented several features to minimize cheating, particularly on the digital exams. Specifically, students couldn't go back and forth, or couldn't go back and to questions they had submitted and answered once they had already submitted the answer. They also couldn't go back and forth between unanswered questions. And digital exams didn't include any questions that could be answered by a Google search or by using study aids like your notes or your textbook. As a result of all of these changes, this is the complex exam schedule we instituted last year. It was, I think it took me about 20 minutes in the presentation last year to explain. I won't explain it all, but it just kind of shows you and illustrates what the exam schedule looked like last year. You'll see there are 3 different test windows, not including the makeups, and then each exam listed on the left. This tells you when it was offered and in what format. So the administration worked really closely with the teachers to determine which format and which window would maximize student success for each exam. And it varied a bit across the exams depending on the format of the exam and the length of time, really the format of the exam. Some exams we offered in both formats. They could take it either in person in paper pencil, or they could take it digitally at home or even in school. But some were only offered digitally. All of the world language exams could only be given at school. Finally, and maybe most importantly, the College Board allowed students to cancel their exam up until the morning of the exam for a full refund. This is not normally permitted. In fact, there's usually a date much earlier in the year. I think it's been changing the last couple of years. But this certainly had an impact on our participation rates last year. So we typically report out on the participation rates in the courses themselves, as well as on the exams and student achievement. This slide shows you the participation rates for the last 6 years, and you'll notice that the percentage of students who took the exam last year dropped by over 20%, where we are consistently just below 90%. This is most certainly the result of the College Board allowing students to withdraw from the exam all the way up until the morning of the exam for a full refund. Students may have learned that the college they're going to wasn't going to award them credit for the exam, or they might just not have felt prepared, whether it was because of virtual or hybrid instruction, or just how they felt right before the exam. They were allowed to change their mind right up to the last minute. So we look over time to see where student enrollment in courses are increasing or decreasing. This slide shows increases or decreases of at least 20% or more. And I also forgot to mention at the beginning that we will obviously post this presentation in the morning on the district website. And a lot of data slides are in the appendix of the presentation if you want to see the supporting data and go in much more detail than what I'm showing on some of these summary slides. You can see that so on the left are these courses where there was an increase of 20% or more in course enrollment, and on the right where there was a decrease of 20% or more in course enrollment. So 17 courses saw an increase. and only 3 courses saw a decrease. The remaining 10 were basically flat or within that 20% range. For comparison purposes, I've also included an asterisk to show you which courses showed a decline last year but an increase this year, and 2 asterisks to show you courses that showed an increase last year and a decrease this year. So you see fluctuations from year to year in a sense that we can't really reach any conclusions about trends at this point. I also want to point out that a couple of these courses like 2D drawing, 2D art, 3D art, typically have very low enrollment, and so the statistical relevance of decreases or increases in enrollment is minimal. This slide summarizes the courses that had more or less than 80% participation on the AP exam. This means that the courses on the left, less than 80% of the students who were enrolled in the course actually took the exam, while on the right, 80% or more of the students enrolled in the course actually took the exam. The courses that I've bolded under greater than 80%, such as English Lang and Calc AB, had over 90% of the students enrolled in the course take the exam. Again, I've also shown you the changes from last year to this year. So for example, European history, French, and Italian had over 80% of enrolled students take the exam, while only 3 courses, human geography, English lit, and 2D drawing, had less than 80% of the enrolled courses from last year to this year. So some of the courses fluctuated again from year to year in ways that make it hard to reach any conclusions about reasons. So for student achievement on the exams, this chart is a 5-year summary of the number of students taking and passing exams. The number of total students taking exams was down this year by 16 students, so not much, but it had been up quite a bit from previous years. The total number of exams taken is also down by 134 total exams. But note that with 605 students taking 1,523 exams, many students are taking multiple exams. Of the 605 students taking an exam, 569 of them had at least 1 score of 3 or better. So overall, that's a 94% of students taking AP exams had at least 1 score of 3 or better. This is down 2% from last year, but I think it represents the outstanding work that the students and teachers did to maintain that level of excellence throughout the pandemic. This slide shows the breakdown of scores over the last 5 years. So what you see here, oops, where did I go? Hold on. Let me go back. I need the score ranges from 5 to 1 are color-coded. So for 2021, 44% of students earned a 5, 33% of students earned a 4, 17% earned a 3, 5% earned a 2, and 1% earned a 1. So that is the percentage of students from 2021 who earned each score on AP exams. Now notice that they're almost the same as last year in terms of the breakdown of scores, with slight decrease in 5s and a slight increase in 4s. Previous to that, scores in the 5 range were a little bit higher over the 3 preceding years. So it kind of represents a decrease we might be seeing through the pandemic, but also consistent from last year to this year. This slide, AP Equity and Excellence, is a statistic that the College Board provides us showing the percentage of students by grade that score a 3 or higher on at least 1 exam last year, as well as the percentage of seniors who score a 3 or higher on at least 1 exam through their entire high school career. So, whoops, I keep doing that. So 59.8% of graduating seniors earned at least 1 3 on an exam sometime in their college career. That's down slightly from last year's graduating class at 61.1%. The seniors who took exams just last year, 47.6% of those students earned at least 1 3 on 1 exam, and you note that that's down from the previous year. I also want to point out that our sophomores' passing rate or earning 1 3 on at least 1 exam has increased each year for the last 6 years. That might be because we have offered a few additional AP courses to sophomores over the last few years. So I have 2 slides for each subject area, starting with ELA. The first of each set shows you the total number of test takers, as well as the percentage of test takers who passed each exam. Each exam is then, has bars here representing each of the last 5 years, and their number of test takers and the percentage of those test takers who passed. Class enrollments were up in English Lit and Seminar, but down slightly in English Lang and Research. The percentage of students passing went up in all courses except for Seminar. Note that in Seminar and Research, the number of students taking those courses is very small. Right, the percentage passing is very high in all courses and a little bit lower in AP Seminar, again, a smaller number of students. On the second slide of each set is the breakdown of scores on each exam, as well as the mean score for each exam is included on the bottom, the mean score of 1 through 5 on each exam. Across all 4 exams, there were few exams that earned less than a 3, so that weren't passing. The greatest percentage of 5s were earned in Research and Lang, and the lowest percentage of 5s was in English Lit, typically taken by seniors. In mathematics, we saw increases in the number of test takers in Calc BC, but decreases in all of the other courses from last year to this year. However, the performance on each exam was incredibly high, 100% passing both Calc exams and statistics, and a slight decrease in the number of the percentage passing on statistics. Overall, these scores are outstanding. So this is the breakdown of scores, 1 through 5, in each of those 4 courses. Notice that the percentage of 5s were greatest earned in Calc BC and AB. The lowest was in Computer Science A, typically one of the more challenging courses. In science, we saw an increase in the number of test takers in chemistry, environmental science, and both Physics C courses. We have a lot of science courses. So chemistry had a really large increase, as did both of the Physics C courses. And that's in students taking the course. While the percentage of test takers who passed was outstanding, 100% on most courses, we see a really large increase in the percentage passing in environmental science, up to 93%. The highest percentage of 5s earned were in chemistry at 84%. It's pretty amazing. Then Physics C, Mechanics, and Physics 1. The lowest number of 5s were in Physics 2 and Environmental Science. In social studies, we also have a good number of courses that we offer. We saw increases in the number of test takers in government and politics, macro and microeconomics, and U.S. history, and some declines in European history, human geography, and psychology, which is unusual for psychology, for that number to go down. The passing scores were really consistent with last year, almost across the board. A couple of slight decrease in micro and macro. The greatest percentage of 5 were in, so even though the overall passing rate went down for micro and macro, it's interesting that the greatest percentage of 5s were also in micro and macroeconomics. And the fewest percentage of 5s in European history over here. But as I point out, that's a low enrolled school course. There's 22 students in that class. In world languages, you see scores for French, Italian, and Spanish. AP Latin didn't run last year. That course runs every other year. So we saw decreases in the number of test takers in all 3 languages, but the percentage of passing is 100% in French and Italian and 93% in Spanish. The percentage of 5s were fairly even across all languages, but Italian, it should be noted that all of the scores were either a 4 or a 5. In fine arts, there were increases in test takers for 2D art and drawing, but there were no test takers in 3D art. But 100% of the students who took the test passed. And again, this is the breakdown of scores, and you see the greatest number of 5s on AP Studio Art Drawing. So this slide shows all of the courses along the bottom, and then the percentage point change in the passing rate from 2020 to 2021. Just sort of interesting to look at how the scores fluctuated from one year to the next. We saw increases in biology, government and politics, U.S. history, environmental science, physics 1, literature, Italian, research, seminar. And we saw some decreases in physics 2 and physics C, electricity and magnetics, Spanish, micro and macroeconomics, statistics, computer science A, psychology, and human geography. So in summary, I think I can say that our AP scores continue to be outstanding despite the difficulties the students and the teachers managed last year. Again, 94% of students had at least one passing score. We note that the percentages have shifted in the percentage of 5. Across some courses, the percentage of 5s has gone down. We believe that the combination of hybrid and virtual instruction combined throughout most of last year, combined with the ability of students to withdraw from the exam all the way until the morning of the exam, were factors that influenced both participation and achievement, and we'll certainly look to see if any of those trends continue into this year. Mr. Syed, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so let's shift gears here a bit and talk about the college admissions for the class of 2021. So on the heels of the discussion of the test scores, now we'd like to discuss some trends we're seeing, and we always start with a snapshot of the class. So this is the 2021 class snapshot, and by snapshot, it's essentially a look at where students wound up, at least initially. And one thing we noticed from the previous year, and you'll see year over year in a moment, but we noticed a significantly greater amount of students attending four-year schools, and you'll see that figure in a bit, but it was in the high 80s in the previous year. It's up to 92%. Four-year schools, 4%, trade schools less than 1%, and non-US colleges less than 1%. And finally, the other is military, gap year, and undecided. That's about 3.5%. The thing that we also notice is that that other category, if you've been with us for a number of years, that does tend to fluctuate, especially given the gap year trend. And so we're seeing fluctuations with gap year that maybe not quite as many students as we thought would be choosing gap year as maybe had in the last few years. Some of that might have been impacted by the pandemic. And I'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. So here's the look over the last several years. As I mentioned, in 2020, 88% of the class matriculated, at a four-year school. It's up to 92%. So some of that is driven by a trend that the counselors saw this past year, and that was a significant increase in applications to state schools. Significant increase. And of course, that would include our home state school here, Rutgers. And so we saw a number of state schools heavily applied to, and you'll see some of those numbers in a bit. That would definitely factor into why we saw an increase in four-year school enrollment. And you'll also notice that as I mentioned, that gap year, that employed military gap year, that does tend to fluctuate over the years, and it was up significantly, considering the numbers are small, but it was up to almost 5% in 2020, dipped back down. And then on the right-hand side, not a surprise, there were no changes to the top 4 schools where students matriculated. Did I say states? Okay, those would be large schools. The top 4 states where students matriculated. And so it's New Jersey, no surprise, Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts. The same 4 states were where we saw matriculation at its highest for the class of 2020. So not a surprise there. There were no major changes where students were applying. And I'm going to turn it over to you. This is my favorite slide.
Sorry, I took your favorite slide.
That's okay.
So this slide, because Sean loves it, it has a lot of information about the class of 2021, and we think it's really interesting what it's showing. But the profile of the class of 2021 went up in all of the metrics. Their average GPA is higher. Their average PSAT, SAT, and ACT scores are all higher than not only last year, but previous years. And they submitted 500, I had to do the math, 586 more applications than the class of 2020, which was which is also consistent. So the number of applications submitted this year is up significantly over the last several years. So the average number of applications per student is 8.9 compared to 7.6 last year. So then you see that the acceptances went down from the class of 2020 at 61% to 51%. So when their profiles are better on paper, their acceptances are down. So these what we believe is a couple of things going on. One, the increased applications, right, obviously has more applications in the pool that they're competing against, as well as if you think about the number of students who may have deferred from the class of 2020, that would have been then in the pool competing with the class of 2021 may have also contributed to this decline. Notice that the class of 2021 applied to 34 additional schools from the class of 2020, and they're attending 30 additional schools from the class of 2020. So in this slide, we're looking at application trends, and we're showing you the schools where students demonstrated increased interest by the number of applications that students submitted to those schools, over 30 to BU and New York University, as well as the schools with decreased interest, where the number of applications declined from 2020 to 2021. A number of schools changed lists completely, with Clemson, Rutgers, Delaware, Scranton, and USC, University of South Carolina, all moving from the increased list to the decreased list, interest list. Northeastern moved from number 3 to number 2, so it moved up a little bit. But Lehigh, UNC, UPenn, Carnegie Mellon, and Cornell all moved from the decreased interest list to the increased interest list. In fact, Clemson last year was number 1 on the increased interest list and is number 1 on the decreased interest list this year. So I guess kids' interests are changing. As well as the trend, I think, to apply to larger institutions, state schools, as well as Ivies. We'll talk about that in a minute, right, Mr. Syatt? So again, we take a look at so now with the schools that the students are attending, the top 10, you notice that there's several schools combined for number 4, for example, where the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Maryland each have 12 students attending, so they're in 4th place. Not much really changed significantly on this list, although, as I said, Northeastern did move from 3 to 2, and I think unusual for the last few years of RVCC moving from 2 to 3. But Rutgers remains number 1, and a lot of the same schools down here are in our top 10, although their numbers might have changed slightly. Mr. Syatt?
Thank you. So this is the Barron's classification for selectivity that we discuss each year, and somebody always asks every year, what's the criteria? Well, I actually don't release that criteria, but the types of schools within each of these categories, some of them are pretty self-explanatory. The Ivy category, historically, we've had a separate slide for the Ivies, which we've kept in the presentation, so we'll go over that shortly. But the most competitive, highly competitive, these are schools like Duke. These are schools that some refer to as hidden Ivies. You might have heard that term before. These are schools that historically have an Ivy reputation, but aren't referred to as Ivy League schools. They would fall into the most competitive category. You'll notice, though, a trend here. Every single category, but Ivy and specialty schools, is actually down. And that's in keeping with this idea that a lot more applications were flooding the market. We had a lot more students nationally applying to schools. And you had the influx of the 2020 graduates who had deferred, who were also entering into the college pool. So what you had was, as we have showed already, lots more students applying to lots more colleges, throwing out a lot more lures in the water than they normally would do so. And therefore, you had more folks competing. And so the interesting thing about this actually is that we're seeing and if you look over the last few years, the numbers were trending up, and then last year we took a big dip. So very hard to draw a lot from this. That's why it'll be interesting when we go back, and hopefully things continue to improve from a health perspective. When we go back to what would appear pre-COVID, it should look more like the 18-19 numbers and even the 20 numbers than the 2021 numbers. Right, except for test optional, right. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So this is the Ivy slide, and again, this is a legacy slide. We've had this in for a number of years, so we kept it in. Folks are interested in this slide. What's interesting about this is, and even I had to write this one down, for 2020, we had 150 net applications to, did I have that right? Yep. Yeah, 2 Ivies, 9 accepted, and then you'll notice this year, 230 applications, so 80 more applications, and more than double accepted. So again, even in this category, you're seeing a lot more applicants. And so because there's a lot more applicants, the likelihood that there's going to be more acceptance increases. And so some of this, again, tied back to test optional. Students feeling confident to be able to apply to schools they might not have historically applied to because it is a test optional school and they don't have to sit for that SAT and ACT, and because they feel very confident about their grades. And some of these schools also are reporting that the grades, the essays, and the recommendations hold a greater weight in some cases than the standardized tests. So Cornell, of course, as we traditionally see, is the most popular school with the most number of applications and the most number attending. And it's a rare year where we have one actually attending Princeton. Princeton, the last couple of years, we haven't had somebody attending, so we do have a Princeton attendee from last year. This is kind of a culmination of, I know, Kristen, getting some feedback from counselors, and we have to give kudos to the counselors, K-12, and really the teachers as well. This presentation is really a culmination of all the work the teachers and the parents with their support, and this is really that culmination, right, where students are attending colleges. So I do just want to show appreciation to the teachers and the counselors in particular. So what we saw, as I mentioned, is our big state schools seeing an increase in applications, as I've mentioned, and you've seen it borne out in a couple of slides that Ms. Fox was showing. We also continue to see deferrals, and those deferrals are traditionally where schools where students would have been accepted. And why? That's given the volume. So the volume, the number of applicants that schools have, they're having to defer students until they go through all of their applications because the volume is up. More wait list activity, also related. We think that's largely due to COVID. And some of this is anecdotally collected from counselors as well. We see more students using early decision. So I know some of our counselors reported that more students were accepted early decision, class of 2021. Less students, as we've talked about, such has been the theme tonight, are reporting standardized tests. And the average acceptance rates, as you've seen, have dropped or did drop last year. And so some of the things we've hypothesized, certainly the test optional, and also those 2020 deferrals flooding into the market, and now creating a more competitive market because there are more students now applying to schools. Some of the same trends we've seen from last year, that the beginning of COVID carried over into 2021, as we've already talked about, self-reporting, test optional, and test optional policies are being carried through. And some of the things that college admissions offices are reporting as important, and these are college admissions offices who are test optional or test blind. They're saying they're putting a greater emphasis on grades, essays, and recommendations. That's not a surprise. That's something that we've seen over and over, and that's something that fairtest.org has talked a lot about, that if you're not sending in your test scores, then you have a strong academic profile as well as a strong essay and recommendations. And I believe Mary Jane McNally still does this for us, right? So Mary Jane McNally, the media specialist at Ridge High School, thank you. She puts together this Wordle. And this really just is a snapshot based on size of the school where our students attend. So obviously the larger the name of the school, the greater number of students who attended it. So it gives you kind of a visual snapshot of where the class of 2021 attended. And I do see the credit there to Dr. McNally. And then, as Kristen mentioned, for those of you that really want to delve deeper and are data geeks like us, you do have a lot of information that once we place this on the website, you'll be able to go through. and then there'll be a test on this at the next board meeting. But again, I just want to thank you for your attention, and we'll take any questions from the board.
Thanks.
Thank you. I know I always enjoy hearing all of this information. I don't necessarily have a question, but a repeat comment, because I don't know if I'll be sitting in this seat next year, probably not. What can we do to try to capture, do you know what I'm going to say? To capture the kids who move from school to school after their freshman year?
Yeah, we have,
You have a plan?
about this.
I'm so excited.
yeah, we looked into this.
I know from personal experience so many students who transfer after their first year, and I do believe that the counseling department would benefit from that information just in talking to kids, because the feedback is invaluable.
Right.
And so that's my non-question.
So there is a slide from last year's presentation with the survey data that Stephanie Smith collected from the class of 2020.
20, yes.
Right, and so we looked at that information this year. So she had 50 responses to the survey last year. She administered it again in the fall, and she had 20 responses. So it's really not reliable information to include, right? No, different classes. So only 20 students from the class of 2021 responded out of 400 plus students. So the discussion was thinking of ways we might be able to incentivize graduates
Exactly.
to participate. That was Nick's idea.
We-
To participate in the survey, and we can talk about that. Like, how might we incentivize graduates to take the survey? I mean, your idea, Nick, was a gift card, and it might have to be worth a little bit. Yeah. Well, it's just one idea. We'll take other ideas, but it's hard to get them to complete the surveys, right? They've moved on, they're in college, they're not necessarily responding to emails from, sorry, Mrs. Smith or Mr. Syed or myself.
And we've hired third parties
Yes.
to do this, right? No, you probably remember, we hired someone to do this 10, 11 years ago, and it was one of those companies, and you almost wonder why they bother, but they put the dollar in the envelope, right? Send back. Nobody sent it back.
No.
We had a very low return rate on that, but that was a that was a group whose sole job was to try to get feedback from alumni. We really do want the feedback, as it would be invaluable. So we've had a couple ideas. I do think now that those organizations have gotten better if we want to look at a third party to try to survey alumni, because the thing we're most interested in is retention. Are they staying at these schools? Are they leaving schools? And then if they're leaving, why? Is it
Right.
is it something we're not doing? Is it something that's happening at the school that maybe they feel prepared for, but then there was something that happened that we couldn't have known would happen? So that's so valuable and would help us, not just the counselors, but the teachers as well. So it's definitely something we're working on. Yeah, but we didn't get a very high return rate when we do it in-house. We get anecdotal reports from this. The question was, do we hear it from the schools? We get anecdotal from admissions offices, but nothing specific about Ridge students. They're not going to give you, generalizations about a high school,
Rutgers gives you
Yeah, we
like
get-
student by student where they're going in the second year, third year, if they're
Yeah, with
transferring
the-
to Rutgers.
yeah.
Right.
What we want is like the after year one snapshot.
Where are they?
Yeah, like after each year, and then where they wind up. It's the 5-year picture. Yeah, you have a question, Jeff? Sorry. And Ms. Smith should weigh in on this too. I don't want to give Ms. Smith a project, but it's definitely something we're working on.
But some of the best times to get that information is when you have the alums in the building, and going back to normalcy, when they do the December concert, you get hordes of graduate students who come for the sole purpose of getting up on that stage and singing the final songs. You should almost have
QR code.
something outside. Yeah, but that's how you get it, is when the kids are in the building.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Any other questions?
Hi, great presentation. My question is just, I'm looking at the Ivy League colleges, and it looks like 241 if I'm right, and my eyes are not that good, it's 241 applications
Initially.
and 10 students, right, attending. So that's approximately 4%, roughly?
Yeah.
Yeah, and out of our
Less
graduating,
than that, actually, a class of 460.
got it.
Students.
So, and even 10 attending out of a class of 460, we're looking at roughly, what, 2 to 3% of our graduating class. Are we doing, like, as a school, is there anything that we're doing to possibly increase this number? Like, do we have any services that we're providing to help this number go up? Only because there seems like there's 241 applicants, so there's clearly an interest.
240 initial applications that dropped to 230 by the time they submit their final application. So it's really 230, a little
Okay.
lower.
Okay. Got it.
Right. Those are applications, not students. So some students could have applied
Submitted to
all of them.
multiple schools. But in general, is there anything that we're doing to maybe get this number up for the kids, or? In
Well,
general,
right.
so I don't know what the statistic looked
I mean,
like last year, but in general, what is
in
the percentage?
In general, what's the percentage of?
Like, let's just compare it to maybe 2020 or
Is that the
19,
previous slide?
9%, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
so 9%.
So you see that the number from 2018 to 2019 took a dip,
Yeah,
and it was low again in 2020. It went up slightly again in 2021.
but so much higher in 2014.
Correct.
And then even 15, 17, 18.
I know why.
You know why?
I know why. I mean, the main reason, I can look, I don't have the number, but I would bet that it's a quarter of the applicants. Because, right, it's the most selective group of students applying. Last year, students were more emboldened because many of these schools were test optional. So your non-traditional Ivy student was applying, so there's
Got
80
it.
students.
So you look
80
like
additional applications.
from
right?
Got it.
2016 to 2021, there's 800 fewer applications.
So I was going to say that a lot of folks, and rightly so, because the policies at many of the schools changed where tests were optional, many more students were emboldened to be able to apply to schools that maybe historically they wouldn't have applied to. And so schools do this because they often want a more diverse candidate, a candidate that isn't necessarily a traditional Ivy candidate. And so, and by the way, we linked a lot of the information to fairtest.org. There's a lot of information about this particular issue on the Ivies. But I was saying that in 2014, we were seeing numbers of applicants more in the 70 to 80 range. And those were more selective students based on tests and GPA. And so you had your more traditional Ivy student. And so thus our acceptance rates were still, again, 18% is really high. We're usually running in the 10 to 14% for Ivies. I remember doing this again many, many moons ago, and we were in the single digits. So that's, last year I think was an anomaly. I don't think we're going to see that number of applicants, but so long as the test optional continues, you're probably going to see more and more applicants to not just those, but the most selective as well, which are, the schools like Duke that I had mentioned earlier. Oh, yep, we've got hands up, yeah.
Okay, so I would actually argue that this slide needs to go. It needs to come out of this presentation because this is a very small percentage of our student. You'd like this slide? Oh, it's a legacy slide. The reason, there are so many things. How many students of our class are we focusing on this? There are 3,000 plus universities and colleges out there. Our students are attending how many? 150 some odd different colleges and universities. We should not be focusing on these 8 that are an athletic conference. Let's go back. If you want to talk about more selective schools, the better, whatever that, there you go. What is this? Barron's, you said?
Barron's.
Gosh, that book that we used to use. Most competitive, Ivy goes in there, highly competitive. Look at the percentage of our students who are accepted to the top 2 these categories. Ivy is pulled out. That's not a category. That's part of the most competitive. So it really is, look at that. That's 60 whatever percent of our students are accepted in the highest competitive schools at the United States. That is remarkable.
I would just also add that I know one of your slides showed that 92% of the students are attending college, 4 years of college, Right, and I think that that's far more the most important piece for the kids attending college. You know, no offense to Ivy Leagues, they're not the be-all and end-all. So I think the fact that we're getting our students into, you know, highly competitive, very competitive, like, we're getting our kids into the schools, so I don't think it's that they're not prepared.
And I would talk about what the counselors do on that front, Sean. Well, we would like to. We just need your permission.
Just as a follow-up, on the other, I don't know, I don't want to call it the other end of the spectrum, another point of view, are we tracking students who leave and go in the vocational direction? Because we've talked about this career skills, and it's wonderful that we have 92% of our students attending four-year college. Should they all be attending four-year college, or is there an opportunity that fits their skills and their interests better? And how are we incorporating that into the bigger picture here? Because we've talked about this for a long time, and I know that it's a project that you have a lot of passion for, Kristen, and I just hope we're considering that as well as we move forward, because that's part of that piece that I mentioned before. So they went to four-year college. Did they stay? Did they leave for the typical reasons, which might be any number of things, but maybe less so in an area like ours, but sometimes they leave because they need to get a job, because something happened in their family or whatever. But did they leave because they just weren't suited to sitting in a lecture hall for, 15 credits a week for, 2 semesters, and they said, oh, I think I'd like to be an electrician or a plumber or a chef or whatever it might be?
Yes, that's a big goal.
And I also know in Naviance we have those career modules, and I know Stephanie is working on some additional modules as well.
Right, we are going to present a little later this year, when Stephanie gets back, our career education program evaluation with the recommendations we have, which includes expanding our use of Naviance and maybe another platform too. So we're kind of waiting for Stephanie to get back, as well as fitting in everything else that we're trying to. It's in the end of May when she gets back. It's included in the career education, program evaluation, yeah. Anybody else? On the board? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we're up to the superintendent's report. There's one item. Would someone like to make a motion for the one item? Mr. Salmon, would someone like to second it? Mrs. White? Mr. McCarrion, do you have anything? After you vote on it. Sure, okay, we'll vote on that, and then he'll do his report. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes?
Ms. Singh?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Ms. Light?
Yes.
Mr. Khanna?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. You're going to do your report.
Yeah, just a couple things. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. We did get our state aid figures last week. I did receive a couple inquiries because it was apparent that the amount of state aid went up $887,212. There were some questions about how that was going to be used, and I just want to let folks know that that's the topic of our next board meeting when we have our preliminary hearing on the budget. So we'll talk about that then. The other thing I wanted to mention was that I didn't hear Gordon talk about the school play here at Ridge. So I think I see Dallas's head back there. There's Dallas. Dallas is back there. I see Mike is still here. And I know that our director, Mrs. Harvey, put in a tremendous amount of work. We had, I believe, 5 showings of Matilda. On a Thursday we had 1, a Friday we had 1, 2 on Saturday, and a Sunday matinee. Mike was telling me that it was the best attended show since the PAC opened. So I just wanted to congratulate Mike and Dallas and his wife and all the staff and students that worked really hard to make that happen. Mike was telling me that we had over all of the schools, actually, kids from all the different schools involved in the production, 144 kids involved from all the schools. So kudos to the team. Sounds like it was amazing and a tremendous amount of work. So thanks for all that. And I'm amazed as I look here at this stage. It looks like you've already repainted it, Dallas. So it's incredible how well you work. So thanks for everything you do for our kids and families. One other thing, I received an email. I didn't hear Gordon mention this, but he might have, because he's quick. The Ridge boys in the distance medley relay, I don't know if you guys saw this. I guess there was an invitational in New York recently. They set a new record nationally for the distance medley relay. So I just wanted to give them a shout out and congratulate them. That's pretty good on a national level to set a new record. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. We're now up to public comment on agenda items. If you have a comment, please come up and state your name and address, and then you can sign in on the clipboard after you give your comment. I don't see anyone coming in person here. Is there anybody on Zoom?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I'll close the public comment on agenda items. We're up to approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion on item 1? Mrs. Gray and Ms. Light, seconded. Could we have a roll call, please, Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Singh,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Ms. Light,
Yes.
Mr. Khanna,
Yes.
Ms. Hero,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. We have 6 items for finance. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. White and Ms. Singh. Is there a I'm looking, I have to remember who the chairperson is.
There is no finance report. The Finance Committee meets next Thursday, the 24th. And just quickly, we have our disbursements item. We have some professional development, then the Model UN, the students are going, yay, they get to go on a field trip. And then we have some student services related items 4 through 6.
Does anyone have any questions about the items? No. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Singh,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Ms. Light,
Yes.
Mr. Khanna,
Yes.
Ms. Hero,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. We're up to the personnel items. There are 16 items. There's an addendum on a separate page. Would someone like to make a motion? Ms. Schaefer and Mr. Khanna. Is there a personnel committee report?
Nope, meeting Friday.
Okay, thank you. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes?
Ms. Singh,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Ms. Light,
Yes.
Mr. Khanna,
Yes.
Ms. Hero,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you. We're up to the policy committee. I think you guys just met middle of the week, right? Policy?
Right. Yes, policy just met last week, so I'll report out at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Curriculum?
I'll be reporting out next meeting.
Okay, and wellness?
Wellness meets Thursday. Maybe I'll wait till the following meeting to report out or something.
Okay, we're up to liaison committee reports. Does anyone have any? Mrs. White?
So we met with the PEC last week, and one of the things that we had talked about was trying to push out information in a helpful way. So I just wanted to tell you about the special services lunch and learns that have been taking place, because there are, the next one is March 23rd. They are from 12 to 1, and they are delivered via Zoom. And the March 23rd is called Behavior, Behavior, Behavior. And then there's one also on March 30th, the transition process. And as we get closer to the ones in May, I'll talk about those too. But I just thought it'd be helpful for people to get those on their calendars. And I would assume that there's more information in the Friday folders that they can find out about, the details of how to sign in to get the links for these.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a liaison report? Mrs. Gray?
The Municipal Alliance met last Tuesday, the 8th, and I just basically have some public service announcements. It looks like in no particular order, sorry. There's a COVID-19 vaccine awareness event for teens that's happening on March 15th, which is tomorrow, and that's a Zoom event. And you can get the link. You can go to it's www.bernardsalliance.org for the link to the Bernards Township Municipal Alliance, and you just request the link. There is on the 22nd of March, there is another event called Johnny's Ambassadors. It's a webinar, and the topic is A Better High, the Science of Natural Highs. And this is a presentation given, this Johnny's Ambassadors is an organization founded by a mom who lost her son to marijuana in a tragic event. There's a subsequent program the following night, March 23rd, called The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana, and the presentation is by Laura Stack, who is the founder of Johnny's Ambassadors. We also have coming up I know Caitlin will be disappointed if I don't share now. On June 5th is the Twilight Challenge. It's back in person, and everybody's very excited. So if you would like to volunteer or participate, walking, running, etc., there are any number of ways you can participate. Again, I would refer you to the website. And there is also coming up on April 30th another prescription drug take back. And there is more information again on the website.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? No? Okay. At this point, we're up to public comment on non-agenda items. If you have a public comment, please state your name and address, and then you can sign in afterwards on the clipboard. It's a quiet night. Any on Zoom?
No, they're not.
Okay. So at this point, we're up to board forum. Does anybody have anything?
I totally forgot a really important one from Municipal Alliance, and it was at the top of my paper. REACH, which is the club at Ridge, in conjunction with the Municipal Alliance, is the Municipal Alliance is collecting nominations for students to participate in the Lindsey Meyer Teen Institute's summer program. Mrs. White's nodding her head. She probably knows more about this than I did until last week. I didn't know a whole lot at all about it. But there are approximately 15 students from each WAMS team that attend this program every summer. Last year it was virtual. This year it's back in person, and they are ecstatic about that. So the nominations are due by this Friday, the 18th. So there is a specific way. I think you can actually find out through William Annan Middle School, but I don't know, is there some way that we can post what I received, Nick, in a place where community members and parents and anyone can find it?
I'm not sure that it isn't already posted somewhere, but if you send it to me, I'll look for it.
Okay.
And we'll make sure we can get it
It
out.
probably is.
When did you say it was due?
This Friday.
Okay.
Karen, can I just add that while the nominations are for current 8th graders going into 9th grade, the Lindsey Meyer Teen Institute is for incoming 9th graders through 12th graders, and a lot of our Ridge students do participate. It's a wonderful, wonderful program.
Thank you for adding that. I do know that there are, I forget the term they use, but there
Yak.
are former participants who become counselors to the summer event, and they report being,
Yeah.
having had a phenomenal experience.
Students who've been through, typically not before 10th or 11th grade, can apply for what's called to be a YAC, which stands for
Yes.
Youth Adult Counselor. And then, once you are in college and you've had, I think, a full year, I think you are eligible to be a CAT. And a lot of our students do go back and do that.
Thank you. Ms. Light?
So I wanted to propose something for the board for consideration. Robin, you and I had spoken about this over the phone. Technology seems to be a big issue in our district for many reasons, not only for transparency to our parents and the website and operation of the schools. It's become, it's here to stay. It's essentially here to stay. So I'm proposing that the board create a technology committee to help support the administration, but also to help make, evaluate recommendations, establish requests for budgeting, refer things to the policy committee, and help with communications, because I think that would help the community in total to just see what's going on, not be surprised by anything that comes out, but also help guide the district on what, we as a community want to do with the kids related to technology and the administration.
Are you referring to like a Board of Education committee, like an ad hoc committee?
Yes,
Of the
somebody
board.
that could support, Alex and the teams making decisions, evaluating software, coming up with capital recommendations for improvements.
It's interesting because I was talking to Gwen Thornton, our school board's rep. It actually came up, I don't even remember how, when we were talking about committees and like what the board committees are. And she said that a lot of districts have gone away from, that did have a technology committee, have taken it away because technology is like everywhere now and it's in all the committees. So like I guess in the beginning, a lot of them had a separate committee to look at it and then decided, well, it's in the curriculum committee, it's in the finance committee, it's in every committee. So I just thought that was interesting when she said that because I hadn't really thought of it that way because I didn't know how many boards actually had it as a standalone committee. I mean, we've had a couple of ad hoc committees over the years. I think at one point we had a facilities committee when we were doing the referendum, right? Because the finance committee meetings were getting even longer than they normally are. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how other board members feel about board committee. I think I'm interested to hear what the district committee has been working on when we have our presentation in April before making any decisions personally, but.
I mean, I feel like we address a lot of this already at curriculum. I'm certainly not saying I'm against it, but I think it's a little bit, what's the expression, putting the cart before the horse, because we haven't heard yet. I mean, one of the things I'll report out the next meeting is, and we'll hear it, is it April 18th? Is that the date for 14th, when we get the information on the I mean, I guess the 11th? So I feel like you're right, we do. We talk about it a lot at curriculum. We talk about it at personnel when we've talked about, shifting and the hiring of teachers and who can teach what and who's teaching computer science and who's, And then when we talk about finance, it's part of the budget. So I'm not quite sure we need to have, at this time, a whole other committee when we touch upon it. But I'm certainly open to it, but I would want to hear first from the presentation of exactly what's being proposed.
Anyone else? Mrs. Gray?
If I'm speaking honestly, I'm not in favor of it. I think that it actually silos something that should be discussed amongst all the committees that exist today. I also think that we are embarking upon more Bernard's Connect outreach. We're just adding other things that are going on, and at a certain point, there's a maximum that you can ask of a group of volunteers in terms of time. Some committee meetings are very long, and then we have these additional liaison commitments that can be long, and we're just doing a lot of other work. And with the nature of our responsibility to that being to hear recommendations, but not to make recommendations, I'm just not sure what the yield would be from 4 board members. You're going to draw in administrators whose time it will be necessary to take from what we expect them to be doing relative to these different initiatives so that they can sit with us. And everybody who knows me knows that I'm not a big fan of being a drag on administrative time that can be better put to use, on the tasks that are keeping the district running rather than having us constantly sitting in a meeting with them. So that's my 2 cents.
Then at the bare minimum, can we
Mr.
suggest having an appointed liaison to that committee?
We'll let Mr. Salmon say what he was going to say first.
So I'm not adverse to it as long as there was like a focus of it. So like from what I've seen, like the facilities related technology, like our HVAC control systems, security cameras, door locks, those things that comes up typically through finance because there's a financial component to pay the vendor to implement those things. Then there you have the curriculum committee software, which is like what we're going to hear more about from Kristen, related to how teachers are using technology. So those kind of, I think, fit within the committee structure we have. The thing you mentioned about Alex's team and the IT staff, I'm not sure what role the board would play there in terms of like what he's implementing on like a kind of network side. I don't know if that's that you were going for, but if there was some part of technology that you're thinking of that doesn't kind of already slot within one of the committees, then it's definitely something to potentially discuss on an ad hoc basis. But it would have to be something that's kind of like not being covered already somewhere.
Well, I'll bring an example of something that's not being covered already, the Go Guardian release, that we were all surprised by that. And I think if we had a liaison to that committee, that would be something that we wouldn't have had a surprise about, and a poor communication to the community.
Right, so that I think comes back to kind of like the curriculum side, like that related to things that came out of a meeting with teachers in terms of, ideas that they were looking at, right? So it's kind of like the same thing with like, Seesaw, how we use Seesaw, right? It came out of what the teachers thought would be good for young kids to use during the pandemic time, so that kind of filtered up through the curriculum committee. So it's kind of like a curriculum-related matter. But if there's something that, like I said, isn't already covered and already slotted in, then maybe it makes sense to look at.
I can speak from in the past, like many years ago, we did have 2 Board of Ed reps go to a committee that was formed to look at technology. It was when districts were starting to switch to one-to-one technology, and so it was a committee put together to kind of research if we wanted to go in that direction, and staff members, did, I remember going to the committee meetings and breaking into groups, and different groups researched different aspects of it and researched what other districts were doing. And then the committee went on site visits to look at one-to-one technology, so it had like a very specific focus. And then we also, board members went into classrooms to see how technology was used, in the classrooms. So it was a very focused, process of like, is that something we'd want? And at what age, do we think one-to-one technology makes sense? How teachers use it. Because for a lot of board members, some of us who are old, we're like, why would they need technology with little kids? We could see what they're actually doing and how they were using it. So that had a more specific focus. I think the teachers that were meeting during the pandemic to figure out how to deliver instruction remotely was kind of almost a separate special committee because of the pandemic. So that's kind of like how some of the conversation happened. And yes, it would have been, I think, if we had someone sitting there, I think then maybe we would have known that they were talking about these computer programs. And so that in retrospect, that might have been a good thing, but I don't know that we would have wanted to be on a teachers committee that was, working on how to deliver instruction during the pandemic, because, we're not the teachers. So, I mean, there might have been a communication gap between how it came to the curriculum committee, but I don't think having a separate whole committee would have necessarily solved that problem, I guess is what I'm saying. Karen?
I couldn't have said it better than you just said it. I think we had a little bit of a communication breakdown, but we didn't, another committee, I do not think in any way would have necessarily saved that from happening. It was just something that happened. And I think it gives us reason to think about how we move forward with a potential future initiative of that or another variety. But I don't think that having, like I said before, and I use this term carefully, but having 4 board members in a silo is necessarily the way that that's going to happen. It's just going to draw people who are already responsible to go to a variety of other meetings to make these decisions to have to just do one more meeting, another 2 hours of their week spent with a, Board of Ed committee. And I just want to add, thinking back to that time that you just referenced with regard to the one-to-one technology and then the board members having the opportunity to see technology in action in the classroom. Every board member was given that opportunity, and I think everyone at the time availed themselves of it, and we had more than one opportunity because we had an opportunity at the elementary level, the middle school level, and the high school level to see technology in action, and I think we all learned a lot from that experience. Because we saw the experts being our teachers, using the technology in their classroom and it was very, persuasive is not the right word because we didn't need to be persuaded, but it was very impressive and I know for me and for some other board members at the time, we were like, wow, now this makes so much more sense to us than trying to understand why. Like Robin said, some of us are older, like why do 3rd graders need whatever we were talking about? And here we are, and they're using it, beautifully and seamlessly in the classrooms for, how long is that now? Wow.
Jen?
I mean, I still think, we talk about all these things in the different committees. I don't think it's a lack of having a committee devoted to technology that is an issue. I mean, we all read out when we do our committee reports, and we talk about technology in all the different aspects. So I don't see it as, and I hate the word. I hate the word when people use the word transparency because that's really not. It's not that we're not being transparent. It's how we communicate, though, that we're looking at. And we, if you listen to our reports, we're very clear on what has been on the agendas and what has been brought to us in terms of the topics. And again, we're getting a report about the Go Guardian and the monitoring system at an April meeting. And we've you just announced that one of the Bernard's Connect strands is going to be on technology. So we'll hear, from teachers, from students, from parents themselves, what their questions are, what their concerns are, what they're happy with, what they hope might change. I think we have the mechanisms in place to have that open communication on the topic right now. So I kind of agree with everything you both have also said.
Then the question is, what is the mediation plan to make sure that another announcement that technology and extensions have been installed on computers doesn't
I think we
happen
have to
again?
have trust in the fact that they've apologized for what has happened, and they have put out a statement to our community that there was never at any time any monitoring going on. I think that we have to show our trust and our respect for those people who work in the district who are working on this, and we have to listen when they come and they give us our presentation in a few weeks.
And Jen, my whole point on this is just, this is giving that support, board support. So whether it be a committee or whether it be a liaison that can join together with them.
Well,
That's
I
all
mean,
I'm
I want to hear what when they present in April, what their recommendations are, because it's not just about a monitoring system. There's other things, in this technology plan. So I'd like to hear what all of it is before making any decisions. But also, I think the Berners Connect strands of having meetings on technology is a good way to, if you want to call it transparency or communication, for the community to know what's going on and for people to all talk to each other. I think, some of the teachers have children, and understand the challenges from the parents' end, of technology. I mean, parents have a lot of concerns that arose during COVID with like their kids having screen addictions and things like that. So I think it'll be a really good conversation for everyone to have of what are the concerns from everyone's angle, because I don't think that some of the parents realize the struggles that teachers are having in the classroom and vice versa. So I think it'll be a good thing. I don't think any decisions are going to get made until we have a lot of conversation. Suzanne, did you want to say something?
I'm just a little confused. I understand your idea behind having a committee, because technology is pervasive across the entire district. The idea of a liaison is a little weird to me, because we as board members are not involved in the day-to-day operation of this district. I mean, we have people who do that, and we supervise Mr. Markarian, who supervises them. So I don't know that we want to start inserting ourselves into various different committees that exist on whatever level that might be, that are operational committees. We have our own committees that people report out to. Now, if there's an aspect within technology that's falling out of a committee, then we need to maybe figure out where it needs to go, or maybe form an ad hoc committee to figure out where it needs to go. But I think right now, to put somebody onto an existing function of the school district, that makes no sense to me.
Well,
I think it's a slippery slope.
And I think as we get further along in making these decisions, and one of my concerns with the Go Guardian, even though we're evaluating it, I think it brings up things for the policy group committee to consider and the wellness committee to consider,
Sure,
to be honest with you.
and that's why we integrate technology into them. That kind of is the argument against having a separate committee.
Okay.
I mean, we overlap, too. I mean, I know how many times Mrs. White has reported out on the Ridge wellness thing, and then I'm reporting wellness and saying the same darn thing. So there's a lot of overlap, and we should have overlap. It's better to have more discussion than less. So if we're talking about it in policy, and then we talk about it in curriculum, and then finance says, yeah, we're not paying for any of this anyway, at least we're getting conversations happening in lots of different subjects.
Why were you pointing at me and Rod?
No, I was pointing at Karen. She's
Oh,
the
it's
head
just
of
Rod.
finance.
Okay,
Karen,
then I don't
Karen,
mind that. I don't mind
Karen.
that.
I just want to kind of piggyback on what Suzanne said with regard to the committees and the overlap. I know that Jen has some minute writing, and I did that job, so I get it. It's a big job to write the curriculum minutes. But at the curriculum meeting, the last meeting, we did just, this will be part of the topic, and it was discussed at that time in that meeting that there will be overlap and discussion in the wellness committee, because there needs to be. And I think for each of us who sit on whichever committees that we do, when we have a conversation like this here tonight or any other night, we need to keep in mind when we're sitting in our whatever committees we're assigned to, what the relevance is, if it's technology or if it's something else, that, how does this fit in, and how does this incorporate, and what discussion do we need to have at that moment or at a future meeting relative to technology or anything else.
Jen?
No, I always have more to say. We just came off of our previous meeting a couple weeks ago, having our annual training. And in our training, one of the things that was reviewed with us is what our role is in terms of what we can do, what we can't do, who we're in charge of, who we oversee. And one thing that was very clear is that our job is not to oversee the teachers and what they do. Like, we have one person that we report to, so to speak, and that's Mr. Markarian. And he, in the terms of the division, is who is responsible for everybody else. So I don't think we want to put ourselves in that position of saying, well, we need to be the liaison with the teachers to make sure that X, Y, or Z happens. That's overstepping what we are actually allowed to be doing, and I just want to be very clear on that, which is also why I think touching upon these things in the committees, that is what we are able to do. We are able to listen to what you bring to us and ask questions, which is what we did when we had curriculum last week and we started to talk about this. And when you give your presentation at the next meeting, that's what we will also do as well. So I just think we have to be very clear and follow the training that we all have been given in terms of what we can and what we can't do.
I mean, I could piggyback on that a little bit. I think, you know, COVID kind of messed us all up in our heads. But in terms of what the board's role is, it's really like vision and strategic planning, right? Like on a higher level, like what is our vision and what we want for the district and what does the community want, right? So, you know, we can give direction to the administration where we would like to see a focus on this, or we would like to see, you know, more focus on career readiness, like Karen was talking about. We've been saying that for a number of years. And so for the whole time during COVID, you know, unfortunately, like 80% of our time was taken up talking about COVID and masks and quarantines and all of that, how to open the schools safely. And we got down into the weeds on stuff that boards don't usually get into because COVID was so unprecedentedly weird that we were being asked to weigh in on stuff that's like super like specific that usually we don't get involved in. So I think, you know, we have to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, we're trying to get back to normal and let's get back to where we were prior to COVID. We had a strategic plan. We had these different larger goals and we need to get back to focus on them. And technology was part of the strategic plan. So had COVID not happened, maybe we would have been having Burners Connect meetings, you know, 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago, starting on that. You know what I mean, and moving forward, but then we got all derailed. So I think, you know, I'd like to hear what they have to say in April, and then we can have another conversation as to where we want to go as a board.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I wanted to bring it to consideration, and I do understand that, you know, this is, you know, kind of a policy-making board. I understood my training, Jen, just to be clear with that. And that was the way that I wanted to actually look at that, helping develop the strat, you know, looking at the strat plan, what are the policy goals for the community, what are the communications for the community, and what is the, you know, what are the goals we're trying to hit with this, and how are we protecting our children?
I just want to say one more thing about, you mentioned the strategic plan, and, you know, it's hard to know who's watching that may or may not have attended those evenings, but they were pretty successful endeavors for everybody. The community felt, I believe, heard. I think they got to speak with staff, administrators, board members, fellow members of the community, whether they're parents of students actively in the classrooms or not. And I don't know, I found it very energizing. I thought it was a really effective way to communicate with the community and hear what the community had to say, and what they, not to say that everything they said they wanted or didn't want was something that could be accommodated, but to have that open line of communication. And communication was one of the things we talked about having a strand for. So while I fully respect and appreciate the overlap we're talking about here, communication is communication. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about some piece of technology or some other, you know, information that needs to be delivered. We have communications at the root of that, and it just happened to overlap with this recent situation with Go Guardian. So, I mean, I feel very strongly at some point when we can, I'd love to see us get that communication strand up and running. And I know we can't do, you know, it's not the circus and we can't juggle everything at once, but I do think that that is one that's so overarching that would be impactful no matter what we're talking about in other strands.
No, and I think that was going to be the second one after the DEI town hall. The next one we were going to schedule this spring was the collaboration and communication one. So, does anyone else have anything for board forum? Rachika?
I just had a question regarding the presentation, and I guess I have to go back to it because it's something that I think to me is of significance. But you know, the slide on the Ivy League schools and the, you know, where the kids get accepted, and there was some sentiment that this is a legacy slide and perhaps it should be deleted from the presentation. And I'm just curious to understand, you know, why we would do that, because in my opinion, I believe there would be a number of students and maybe parents who are interested in that data and information. So I'm just curious, like, why?
I mean, I've been around for all these presentations for a million years. I think the feeling is there's other top schools that are not Ivy Leagues. You know what I mean? There's MIT, there's Stanford, there's West Point, there's other really hard to get into colleges. So I think it was more a comment like, why are we fixated on that small little segment of schools? If we're going to look at the top schools, why don't we just put them all into that category?
So
I mean,
have we ever considered just expanding on providing that information? Because I think that would be great information and data that, again,
But I also
I
think
mean-
it diminishes from the accomplishments of the children that are not at that level also.
diminishes in which way?
Just by acknowledging, just these top 10 students that are attending these schools, not everybody in our district is top 10 students. And I hear a lot from the community that we do really, really great for the top, really, really great, for the special education, but the kids in the middle kind of get lost. And I feel like that slide accentuates that.
But do you feel that we should take away from their moment also?
No, I should not. No, but I think I like your idea of expanding it.
I like the idea of expanding it too.
Well, okay, so I'll disagree. But, I mean, I think that the thing is that that information is easily accessible on Naviance, which is a program that you'll, get when you get to the high school with families. So you can see the distributions and over the years what's happened with the admissions. I mean, I think that there's too much focus. This is one thing that we formed the wellness committee for, is to try to de-stress our students rather than pushing them to inappropriate academic, not achievement, but inappropriate academic standards that, everybody must go to this, set of schools. And I think that by putting up, again, what is an athletic conference set of schools is not necessarily useful to families as much as it is just putting emphasis on 8 specific schools out of 3,000. And so that's my argument. And again, I think that the distribution that you've got up there, I mean, the more I thought about what Mrs. Gray said after, when I was saying, look, how many kids are in the most and highly competitive, but, my gut's also about everybody else. It's not that it's, I am not into anti-intellectualism, please understand that. But what I do think is important that we are making sure that we're preparing all of our students for whatever they're striving for, whatever they're going for. And some of those students, it's, they're very excited about their achievement to get into some specialty schools or something that is just not on the selectivity radar scale. I mean, we have, how many students were on there going to Rutgers? Rutgers is not in that most selective or highly selective program, and it's not that those kids aren't great, by the way. They're very, very bright, but it's not in those two categories because the big state universities, and we're going to see more and more of this because the big state universities are able to admit more kids. So their distribution, their selectivity is less. So it's not going to, you're going to see very, very few of the big state universities that are of more interest to our students on the lists of the most selective schools. My 2 cents.
I think we're all kind of saying a similar thing because nobody wants to take away from any of the students that graduate and go and choose whatever they happen to choose. But I think that, in the defense of the legacy slide, I think a lot of families move to Basking Ridge because we have such great producers, right? Our students are smart, they matriculate, they go to four-year colleges, and then go further and beyond. So I feel like having that legacy slide is something that the district can brag about. With that being said, I don't want to not give credit to the kids who go to a Rutgers and then go off and become doctors and lawyers and do whatever makes them happy. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't have to go down the same path as the next student. That should never be promoted. It should be encouraged if they want to do that. So I just think that we need to create the space for all of these students and talk about, what are these kids doing? And to Karen's point earlier, if they're going to a community college, are they transferring a year later? Or if they're going to a Rutgers, are they going somewhere else a year later? You want to know. Well, I'm just saying, it happens both ways, right? You go from a great school to a not-so-great school, and sometimes you go from a not-so-great school to a fabulous school. So I think that we all are saying the same thing in different ways. and I just don't want to, talk about one and not the other, I
I think
guess.
the other thing that I would say is that it gives the opportunity for the counselors to talk about good matches for students, talking about schools that are appropriate for everything and everything about them. And they may be the most selective schools. I mean, you left out a few on that list of, we've got, Georgetown, you mentioned Stanford, the military academies, all these places, but also the little Ivies, Amherst, Williams, all those those wonderful, wonderful places that if you take them off this slide, they get less attention. And the counselors are not as able to fight through some of the old stereotypes and the information that may be outdated about what is appropriate for students. So I just think that it opens more doors to conversations if you're not just focusing on the same 8 schools. Vanessa?
I think there are so many other aspects that go into deciding the schools that they want to go into. I think, the SAT or the ACT, the scores is one of the aspects, the financials, the other aspects are so much. So I see where we are coming from, but I think the focus should be on our graduating rate, our SATs or ACT, even those get diminished as the colleges are not even requiring it. So I think but trying to understand where as a community we are heading and getting to that 4-year college or whatever it is that they want to do, right? Whether it's a 2-year vocational or whatever course they want to do, but they are graduating with what they want to do is more critical than where they're landing up.
Ms. White?
I know I had reported out sometime this fall in curriculum about the career and I'll call it career and readiness and some of the changes that have been made. And the reasons for some of that was because it was important to be able to inform, teach, communicate to students that there are other pathways besides a 4-year college, a 2-year college. And I know you mentioned you're going to be reporting out on that. So I think that that's important to keep that in mind. And I also think it's important to keep in mind that one of the reasons wellness was formed, as you mentioned, was to address this notion of the pressure on kids. And little things have been done over the years. I mean, it's got to be at least 4 or 5 years ago where we stopped putting up in the hallways the schools and the name of the child when that kid got in, because while maybe that child felt great, it also was so stressful to the kids who were like, wait a minute, I'm not hearing for 6 more months, and oh, they got into that school, that's on my list. Well, now if they've gotten in, what if well, there goes we've taken so many steps to try to support the students, make them recognize there's a pathway for everyone, there's a college for everyone, there's a vocation for everyone. Let's not compare ourselves to each other. And I'm not saying that slide has to be taken away. I mean, that's the whole, but I am saying that I don't think the focus on just those schools should be the priority. And I've got kids in college, so I've lived it. I've lived, the junior year. Now I'm in my 3rd time going through it our SATs were just canceled. Now we've got to figure out life. Like, oh my God, what do you mean the SATs are canceled? When can I take them? It is so incredibly stressful for our kids. Like, we don't need to have a slide that just is like, these are the 8 schools. Nobody's going to get into them, but you should know that, 140 whatever did initially apply, but, don't pay attention to it. I just think that you have to balance things out. It doesn't mean kids, can't be encouraged when it's appropriate for them or they want to try and it's their reach. But I don't think that has to be the number one priority of what we're focusing on.
I completely agree. I don't think it should be a priority. I just think that that information is somewhat valuable to some parents and students, and maybe not even in high school. I mean, we have other parents who are looking, and they're just looking at certain statistics. They want the data and the information because perhaps it's applicable to their set of kids. So I think that was the only reason why, that I just do think that the information, there are people who want that information.
I think the concern, from my perspective, especially considering our focus on wellness, was your follow-up question about what are we doing to get more kids in? And that's the question that comes from elementary parents who start accelerating the pressure on the students that we're trying to prioritize. So I think that that's the concern. We're not doing any, I mean, Harvard doubled in applications last year. There's nothing we can do about that. So, you know, it's getting harder and harder at these places, and our students are still doing really well.
No, I definitely agree, and just to give you some context on the follow-up on that question is because, again, for those students who do fit the criteria, and there is a possibility, given that it is getting harder and harder to get in, perhaps there's something, if there is something that we can do as a district to help them possibly be a competitive applicant, because it is only getting harder and harder, and our statistics are showing GPAs are going up, SAT scores are going up. So again, if there is something that we could do, there is a small sect, maybe it is a small sect, we can do it.
But I would argue, for lack of a better word, we are doing that. We have all the APs that we, could possibly, we advertise every possible SAT prep you can do. We've got the accelerated math that starts in the elementary. We've got the accelerated math now that's moved to the middle school. We've now allowed 10th graders to take AP courses. I don't think that there's something that we are not doing that's the reason our kids aren't getting into the Ivy Leagues. The truth is, it's a small percentage. We are a very strong academic district, and quite frankly, the worst place in the world, they say, is to live in New Jersey when you're applying to colleges. That's just, right. Like, it just, unfortunately, that's the reality. So those kids where a school like the Harvard, the Yale, that's really where they belong, they're taking all those courses that we are offering. They're doing all those things. I don't think it's because we aren't providing them with what they need.
I think all those things get the student to that point where they are now a competitive applicant. Once they're a competitive applicant, is there something we can do perhaps junior or senior year? I think that is just some of the feedback that I have gotten from students who are applying, not just to the Ivy League schools. I mean, I'm talking about in general, like some of the more competitive, most competitive, maybe the other schools, but in general, that there could be a little bit more that could be done once that student has reached that point.
So I just want to say a couple things about the slide. I mean, it's a legacy slide. I'm fine if it stays. Am I heartbroken if it doesn't? No. But I hear the point about it is something that people who come to our community are interested in knowing is our success in these highly competitive schools. But what I would add is that, and not to be argumentative, it's harder to get into Stanford from Ridge High School than it is to get into Cornell by like an order of magnitude, I'm pretty sure. So we have to put it in its context. Maybe it should be that highly competitive. Where's Duke? Where's Stanford? Where's MIT? Where are the military academies? Whatever. Either way, and I'm just keeping it real, people, most people didn't come here tonight, as you can see by this crowded room, and I would venture a guess that there are tons of people that don't even know where to find the presentation on the website. So, and I love you guys, you know that. So it's not, this is I've been coming to this presentation forever, like literally forever, and I love hearing it. But I think kind of what Gudia said, I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. We're wrapping it in different words, but I don't think anyone has like a core, well, maybe Suzanne a tiny bit, a core issue with the slide. It's more and that's fine. I'm not, no knock there. I'm just saying, I think in the bigger picture, we have students that attend a lot of really competitive schools. We also have students that attend what end up being really competitive schools for them across the board. And to me, you heard me say it when I was in the audience, are they going to the place that fits them best? You can go to an Ivy League school and hate it, like there's no tomorrow. So is it the right place? It's great if you get in, but are we getting them to the schools that fit what they're looking for to the best that you can figure out what a 17 or 18-year-old is looking for?
Okay, I think you wrapped it up well. Anything else for Board Forum? Can we have a motion for adjournment? Ms. Light and Ms. Hira, second. All in favor?